So, along with this imperial world of South Asia, going hand in hand with political consolidation was sort of this cultural, social consolidation as well, with the context of epics. And we'll come talking about epics um, in general, but I mean, epics really, they bring people together. They're stories that are embedded with meanings and ideas and connections that people can relate to. And in India, we have two of those, two very important stories, both composed around the same time. Again, this is sort of 400 BC to 400 CE. So there's quite a long period, and a lot of that is because epics, nobody just sits down and write an epic, right? That epics primarily they're a collection of stories that are intertwined, but that's part of how epics are formed, right? Some people have some stories over here about a certain figure, and you connect it with this other story, and then you weave those things together. That's really what the Mahabharata did. Is it weaved a lot of these stories and these figures and these peoples and turned it into sort of a story um, about India, about South Asia, and so over these course of this time, these stories get written in Sanskrit. Actually, originally they were orally composed. I mean, these early epics were poems set up of couplets that then were later on written down, and they were more meant to be performed. People will go around, they'd act them out. This is one of the longest stories in the world. There's 100,000 couplets, so these traveling groups will go around and act out the Mahabharata in different stories, and episodes. So it's very much part of bringing these worlds together. And there's nested stories, episodes, all made into these larger literary stories. The Mahabharata is about 100,000 couplets over 18 chapters. And I'm just going to kind of give you broad strokes, paint with them, and kind of give you the major ideas and some of the why they're important and who the figures are. So the Mahabharata is said that it's narrated by this guy named the sage Vyasa here. Again, this is like the first level of these that the sage Vyasa is telling this story. And it's narrated by him, and he's the father of the two brothers who are kind of their families, or their sons are the ones that are going to kind of fight over this kingdom. And it said that Ganesh, who will meet, who is the son of Shiva, is the one who writes all of this down using using his elephant tusk there. But basically, overall, there's these sons of Pandu and the sons of Dhritarashtra. Um, they both cannot be kings for certain reasons. So it's who's going to inherit the kingdom, and it's these cousins, these Pandavas, the sons of Pandu, versus the Kauravas, who the sons of Dhritarashtra, and they're going to fight over who's going to control the kingdom of Hastinapura. That's kind of the overarching summary of the Mahabharata. So who are these people? So the Pandavas, there's 5 of them. The father Pandu, he's cursed. He can't sire children. If he has a child, he's going to die. So he has 2 wives, Kunti and Madri. Kunti has been granted a boon. There's a lot of boons. The gods play a big role in this. Kunti's been granted a boon, a gift, that if she prays to a god, she'll have a kid. So, which then kind of gets around this Pandu thing, so that Kunti can have kids, but it's not technically Pandus. So she prays to gods, the god of Dharma, who's like righteousness, has the eldest son Yudhishthira, who is kind of exemplifies kingship. Second one is the god of Vayu, this god of wind, who's Bhima, and he's very strong. The god Indra, who so you kind of see these sort of an early Vedic god, the king of the gods of the Vedic world. His son is Arjuna, and he's the archery guy. And then Kunti grants Madri, having 2 kids, Nakula and Sahadeva, who are twins. Nakula is a god of sort of or the king, he knows horses, and Sahadeva is one of swords. So that's kind of the Pandavas brothers, except right there is another Kunti, before she has the Pandava kids. She tests this. She prays the sun god Surya, and has this kid named Karna, who's technically then the oldest one, but and he plays a major role later on in the Mahabharata as well. So that's the Pandavas. The Kauravas, Dhritarashtra, he's the older brother of Pandu, so his kids technically should be the ruler. However, he's blind, so he can't rule, And so there's so all either the Pandu can't have kids, he's blind, so that's why there's this issue there. Um, and so a lot of parts of the story are actually told. There's another length of this of Sanjay is recounting a lot of particularly the war is being told to Dhritarashtra by Sanjaya, this other figure. Dhritarashtra has a wife Gandhari. They have trouble having sons, so they pray to the gods and they say, put a lump of flesh and split it into 1,000 or 100 clay jars, and then Gandhari sort of festers this lump of flesh for 2 years, and then split it into 100 jars, and they have 100 sons. The oldest, Duryodhana, who's kind of the strongest leader of the Kauravas. So that's kind of the two main families who are going to fight for the kingdom. They grew up, the whole beginning of the thing is growing up in Hastinapur. They're cousins. They're taught so they have the same, the uncles teach them all about statecraft. So the whole beginning of this epic is all about, it's embedded with, how to be a good ruler. And again, this is where we get these are the characteristics of these kings. Yudhishthira is a great ruler. Duryodhana does everything bad. He's volatile and short-tempered, where Yudhishthira is very patient. So you see, who should be a good ruler and a bad ruler. All about statecraft, bows, archery, mace, Nakula horse training. Here's sort of the worlds around them. Kuru, this is where Hastinapura is. Here's sort of the fictionalized Hastinapura. But we do have archaeology that goes back, maybe not exactly to the time Mahabharata, but we know there was early forts all over these regions. There is this interesting story, Ekalavya, who is a Shudra. So he's kind of a lower on the totem pole of the Varna system, but he's a very good skilled archer. He wants to train with the Pandavas. It's this very interesting story. Again, there's stories within stories. But one of these stories is he says, okay, I want to train with you. And I think Drona says, okay, I'll train you, but in order to train, you have to do something for me. And he says, sure, whatever you want. He says you have to cut off your right index finger, which if you're an archer, that's the most important index finger. So he does because he wants to, honor his teacher, but then he can't be an archer. So you can see all these different embedded stories within this book. And then as they grow up, Duryodhana tries to kill Yudhishthira. So they flee. The Pandavas flee the kingdom. They meet Draupadi, who becomes their wife. So they all share one wife. They meet this guy named Krishna, who is Vishnu. He plays a major role in the Mahabharata. And then they ultimately return and they agree to split the kingdom. Right? And then out comes a little bit later. There's this famous dice match. And again, if we look back, I gave you that the Vedic hymn about gambling. So gambling is part of this world. So they gamble, and Yudhishthira is this great king, but he does have a vice. All these characters have one thing holding them back, and Yudhishthira's vice is he gambles. And so Duryodhana's uncle helps him cheat. He has this magic power to make the dice work. So Yudhishthira loses everything. He loses his kingdom. He ultimately loses his family. This is this is the last roll of the dice game where he bets his wife Draupadi, loses it, and then Duryodhana tries to pull off the sari of his wife. This is where Krishna reveals himself as to be a god, that he makes the sari never ending. So as they're trying to pull it, it never ends. So this is where Krishna kind of says, "Let's see, I've got these skills." And then for the next 13 years, the Pandavas have a bunch of adventures. They have to live in a neighboring kingdom for a year and not be discovered. So there's a whole bunch of stories there that we kind of move over. Because at the end, right, the major thing is this Kurukshetra war. They all come back at the end here, where they have this big battle. It's an 18-day battle where they ultimately fight. Arjuna kills this other guy, Bhishma. Bhishma is one of his teachers. Bhishma has been cursed that he will be killed by someone who's neither male or female. So there's this transgender figure, Shikandi, who kills Bhishma on behalf of Arjuna. It's a whole backstory of why she's upset with Bhishma. Arjuna's son Abhimanyu is killed. Karna, who is the other son, he kills Bhima's son. And then ultimately Karna is killed by Arjuna. Here's the famous scene here where Karna's chariot breaks down, and he's shot in the back. So it's this, everyone's kind of dying here. Drona, who is another one of these major figures, teachers of these two groups, he's deceived and dies. He thinks his son is killed, but his son shares the name of this elephant. So they say, oh, this Ashwatthana has died. Technically, Yudhishthira says this to announce that the elephant died, but knowing that Drona will think it's his son, and give up. And then ultimately, this is a very famous scene where Drona is killed with all these arrows, but then he stays alive and he gives the whole chapter of the Mahabharata is a speech he gives. And then ultimately, Bhima kills Duryodhana and the Pandavas win. But so that's the story in a nutshell. Within this, and in the Bhagavad Gita, we'll get in this. This is the reading for this week. Is that this is a very famous text. This is right before the Kurukshetra war goes, where Krishna and Arjuna are looking out at the battlefield, and Arjuna says, "No, I can't fight. Right? These are my friends and family. I can't do it." And Krishna, who's also Vishnu, says, "No, you should. Right? That your dharma, your duty that we'll talk about, is you have to fight. That's what your job is. So you have to do it." And he goes on. The Bhagavad Gita is this big text within a text that talks about karma and duty. We'll get into this when we talk about Hinduism a little bit more as well. That all actions are action. Even if you don't act, you're still in action. Krishna reveals himself as Vishnu. Here he is. This is what chapter 11 is about. The reading for this week. It also talks about like yoga, the best ways to act, and the concentration action, right actions, right knowledge, right worship, and in the end, kind of the best way is to worship me. So this is where Vishnu becomes this major god of Hinduism. And then in the end, the Pandavas win. At the end of the Mahabharata, they rule for a while. Yudhishthira rules for 36 years. Then ultimately they retire from kingship, and they start wandering in the forest. They die one by one, and each gives this long speech. Yudhishthira is the last. He has this dog with him. And Yudhishthira says, I don't want to die. I can't leave this dog behind. Right? So it's a man's best friend type thing. And then the gods say, well, that's actually the last test. This dog is actually your father Dharma. And you've passed the test, so you can die because you've showed that you are very, very honorable. So the Pandavas die. Krishna, who is this other major figure, he goes back, and his clan is this big civil war, and he's killed in that, which is a whole other story. And then ultimately Parikshit, who's the grandson of Arjuna, becomes king. His son, Janamejaya, says, hey, I've heard this story of our family. Can you tell me this? And then the end of the Mahabharata is somebody sitting down. The sage Vyasa shows up, who we meet in the beginning, right? And he says, yes, let me tell you this story of the Mahabharata. So it's sort of this the beginning and the end all come back around. So this is this epic of the Mahabharata.